Welcome back to ESBR Boxing. Before we get into the video, just like, subscribe if you've not subscribed already. I think like 85% of the people who watch our videos aren't subscribed, so if you do enjoy it, subscribe. Now we've got that nonsense out of the way. Delighted to be joined by my good friend Owen. Owen, how are we doing, mate?
All good, Dan. All good. Excited for tonight's video. It's one that I've previously discussed on one of our videos with Elliot Grigg. And yeah, very excited.
Yeah, without further waffling, we'll get into the topic of the video, which is sort of news we expected, but it still feels like significant news anyway, that Naoya Inoue confirmed he would be vacating his undisputed bantamweight crown and moving up to super bantamweight, where, you know, there's always the potential, more world titles, big fights. We'll get into who we sort of think could, you know, that maybe be against in the future, but just initially, just immediate reaction on to the news that Inoue would be moving up to 122 pounds.
It's one that you never know what to expect in boxing nowadays. The politics behind it's insane. It's one that I felt should have happened before the announcement. It's one that I've spoke quite confidently about that. Inoue should be moving up. He's absolutely cleaned the division out. You know, he's beaten Anita Donaire twice for a start. There's literally nothing else for him to do at that weight. He's clean for everyone. Paul Butler, I've never seen anyone look so sharp doing so little. Everything that he did do, it would pinpoint the accuracy. It felt like every jab he threw landed. When he wanted to hurt him, he could. And it sort of felt like he stopped him when it was all okay, enough is enough now. So it's not something I necessarily 100% expected, but it's something that 100% agree with. It was the right decision. And yourself?
Yeah, mate. Didn't come as too much as a surprise. It was, I think he had alluded to it in interviews even before the Butler fight that he phrased it as if he won. I think we always knew it was when he won that he would move up to 122, and it makes sense really if you look at like the potential fights that are left for him at 118. The only one that any of us really mentioned was Casemiro, who looks like he's going to move up and weight himself, and I think the only other fights of any interest would be super flyweights moving up to 118. So I think from like a legacy chasing perspective, obviously capturing more world titles and even like the biggest financial fights, I think it made sense. In terms of potential names, you would imagine he's only really good at sight on world champions, which obviously there's only two up at super bantamweight, Stephen Fulton and Mirjan Akhmadaliev. Do you think there's a chance we'll see either of those fights before, we'll say, the end of this year? Give it a bit of a broad scope for the end of 2023.
I do, based off one reason, because correct me if I'm wrong, but when I've seen champions in the past when they get to unified status, and when they get to undisputed status, when they've got all the belts, the WBO allow you to become a super champion. So when you step up in weight, you're number one. So straight away, he'll be number one for Stephen Fulton. Now, with boxing, for all we know, they might say you've got to have one fight. I mean, you've got the likes of, you've got Lewis Neary. He's quite a big name in the super bantam. But Akhmadaliev's only had something ridiculous like 11 fights. So I think Stephen Fulton is the one. I think we will see one of the two, because Inoue, he is quite an active fighter. We've seen he's happy to fight anyone. The only thing with Inoue is his last few big fights, and most of his major fights have been at home. So it is a case of, is it that the marketing is better for him out there? Is it that he's too scared to come across? But when you look at the way he fights and the power he's got and the victories and stoppages, I really don't think it'd be a fear factor. I don't think he's got the most amazing marketing for someone of his level. If you went outside sort of boxing hardcores and asked them, do you know off the cuff who's Naoya Inoue? I don't think too many people would come back with an answer. So I think Stephen Fulton in America, in Vegas, is the answer for me. I think we'll see at least one. He might fight one of the two champions, have sort of a tune-up of still of a big name, and then move on to the other. I think we'll definitely see one. Two, probably a bit of a stretch. I know we're only at the start of the year, but with boxing politics, when the bouts are in different hands, it's a nightmare. We've seen it at heavyweight, for example. The politics behind the different organisations is mental. So I do think definitely one. Ideally for me, it's Fulton. I'd like Ahmadaliev to have a couple more, then throw him in with Inoue. But yeah, definitely one. Not sure about yourself, but I see it being Fulton personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The only thing on a potential Fulton fight is it was announced that he would be fighting a rematch with Brandon Figueroa for the vacant title up at featherweight. Vacant, I think it was WBC, which I don't know. It seems like a strange move. Maybe because it's only next month, he's thinking it's a relatively big fight for technically a world title, and I'll not have to cut as much weight given it's only a month or so away. But that doesn't really scream out to me that someone who's dying for a fight against Inoue. So it'd be interesting to see if, because I'd imagine all the questions to Fulton after that, should he come through Figueroa in February, will be about Inoue. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of answers he gives, because I think we do want to see him fight an established champion and not just pick up like an easy vacant title. You know what I mean? Just on the topic of like him fighting in Japan and stuff, I think that's where you're only going to see him fight. And I don't think it's necessarily down to a fear factor. I think it's more just because that's where the most revenue is generated. You know, he sells close to 20,000 tickets every time in Japan. And as big a fight as him and Stephen Fulton would be to like boxing hardcores outside of Japan, like that's not going to do anywhere near 20,000 tickets in Vegas or anything like that. So I think we are only going to see him in Japan for the foreseeable future. It's strange because the Fulton fight was the one that's mentioned most. You've only heard sort of Fulton and Inoue as opposed to like Fulton v Akhmadaliev. It feels like to me anyway. Maybe that's just because Fulton's viewed as the sort of number one super bantam in the world. But I don't know. Just as I said at the start, that rematch with Figueroa up at
has been mentioned.
It doesn't really scream out that he's dying for the fight, but we'll see what happens after, I suppose.
One thing I did want to throw a question back to you. Obviously, taking revenue out in terms of ticket sales, pay-per-view costs, and how much money it makes, in terms of actual pound-for-pound rankings, fighter versus fighter, would it be the biggest fight of the year, do you think, in terms of actual pound-for-pound against each other? Because you've got someone who's cleaned out one division, Fulton, who's the obviously champion at the division up. They're both Inoue definitely elite. Fulton is looking to be part of the elite. So in terms of matchups that are possibilities, do you see it as one of the top ones, or?
It's definitely up there in terms of fights we could potentially see that have, you feel like, some chance of happening. I think Fury Usyk is the one, really. People are often sort of hesitant to put heavyweights in their pound for pound rankings, but for me, Usyk along with Crawford and Inoue, I wouldn't argue with any of those as the number one. And Fury, I think like you still have to like, I know he's not got the depth of a resume of an Usyk or anything like that, but I still think you have to put him in sort of like your top 15, 20 in a way. And then obviously everything's just bigger in the heavyweight division. But aside from that, I mean, we're not going to see Beterbiev Bivol anytime soon. Crawford Spence, I don't even want to mention that. Like, so you're probably not far wrong. I've always said that I think Fulton would be probably the biggest test of Inouye's career so far. Like, you forget Inoue started out at light flyweight, and Fulton's a career super bantam, I think, and he would have both the size and physical advantages, along with like he's obviously not as technically good as Inoue, but he's got loads of ability as well. So be interesting. But no, it's a good question, definitely.
And that was just on my mind, because obviously as soon as I seen Inoue vacated, it was, to me, it's, although a lot of things are obvious in boxing, the Fulton fight is the obvious one to make. But look at the fights you mentioned there, obviously Crawford, Spence, etc. We see these sagas go on and on and on, and obviously with the politics of boxing. But hopefully it is one that we see.
Yeah, definitely, mate. As I said, we could chat about it all day, and hopefully after the Figueroa fight, we get some positive news on it, even some positive comments from Fulton. If not, hopefully a fight with Akhmadaliev. Certainly you'd like to see him fighting for a world title here, but we'll wrap it up there. I think we've waffled on long enough. As I said at the start, folks, if you enjoyed it, please like, comment. I know we've got a lot of Inoue fans seem to watch these, so comment what you think. Do you think there's any tests for Inoue up at super bantamweight, and which of the champions do you think would give him the biggest test? But we'll leave it there. Cheers, Owen. Cheers, folks, for watching. Bye.
Pleasure as always.
There we go.